as they start to feel the pinch. Yep.
A couple of things I think that Howard mentioned are actually good for the environment, because then that would promote efficiency, conservation, managing your use of utilities. I think is, I would say this, wouldn't I? But I do think that price does play a part. We do not adequately price the scarce resources that we are consuming, and unless we send that price signal, that's as important as the ethical values that people have to learn and to grow up with. And then the next challenge is what is the business cycle that would actually allow the income that is generated from that pricing to flow back into generation of sustainable business activity.
Well, in many ways, I guess the stars are aligned for us here in Asia. I mean, the emerging markets is, this takes in this part of the world, so they're rising incomes. You say the environment is still very much on the agenda despite the financial crisis. What would you like to see this part of the world focus on and do, Dr. Goodall?
Well, I have my biases, and one of my biases is I feel very passionate about protecting the tropical rainforest because there's this rich biodiversity, and I just happen to love forests. And, we talk about the forest services. They can help us have clean water, clean air, and so forth. And I like to think it's more than that. There's some psychological need in us for nature, and for me it's the forest, and it's beautiful, and it's spiritual. And so I want the forest for that as well as for the services. We talk about the services because that's a way of, we'd have to put a price and a value on everything these days to preserve it. But so what's concerning me is the destruction of the Indonesian rainforest, the oil palm plantations, the fact that the orangutans are pushed almost to the brink of extinction, and they're such amazing creatures, and the gibbons and all the other animals. So, that's my, but I would also like to see, and I think people here could help, because we haven't really got roots and shoots going in a lot of the Asian countries. And it doesn't grow because I say, I think we need to put roots and shoots in Thailand. I can't do that, I don't have money. So we have to find a sponsor. We have to find a passionate person who says, this is going to help our kids to learn more about what's going on in the world and connect them to other youth who feel the same.
You have a lot of faith in youths, Dr. Goodall. Why is that so?
Because, well, I've met them. Everywhere I go, I find these young people with shining eyes wanting to tell Dr. Jane what they've been doing to make the world a better place. And some of their projects are mind-blowing. I mean, and they don't give up. And it goes wrong and they start again. And I've seen children who've been, like in the refugee camp, without hope, hopeless, apathetic, starting to work, starting to understand that they can make a difference, and perhaps most important, that their life matters. I've had children, 9-year-old untouchable children in Nepal, crying because they'd never heard before that their life mattered.
Howard, a lot of your work takes you to Indonesia, as you say, and Dr. Goodall was talking here about the Indonesian rainforests as being an important area for us to pay attention to. I'm not saying that Halcyon, should, although it'd be good if they take up the cause as well. But the fact that Asia has an opportunity now to align efforts because there is money and there is will. Could you comment on that?
I think there are still huge opportunities for conservation of rainforests in Indonesia. I think that the plantations, mainly palm, I mean, they need to define boundaries. There's a growing industry now for the use of palm biomass to replace fossil-based fuels. It's very much in its infancy, but there's potential, and that would mean less slash and burn, and hopefully less haze in Singapore. Because if you put a dollar value on those palm trunks, all of a sudden it's revenue generating to actually cut them down instead of burn them down. That's promising. But I mean, since I'm in the industry of processing rubber, we need to start looking upstream at who supplies us and hopefully eventually own assets in that kind of plantation. But I'm a great believer in agroforestry. And rubber is something where you can grow within a secondary forest, you know, and that would actually protect that type of forest. And you can have high-yielding sub-canopy crops like cocoa and vanilla, which generate income so people don't have to log that much, right? So, I mean, I think there's great promise for that in Indonesia, and I think it's also a matter of putting the right dollar value on forest conservation. You know, you get much more from a forest by leaving it as a forest than logging it. And even if you log selective trees, you're basically creating inroads for more extensive and illegal logging. So that's got to be very much understood. And I think ecotourism is something that's undercapitalized on in Indonesia. You know, I think that there's that vague association, and I think Dr. Goodall understands that there's an energy that comes out of a forest that, this is a bit hippie, okay, so excuse me, but I mean, it does create harmony, balance, and happiness, okay, from just being there. And I think more people need to realize that.
And that's, by the way, not hippie. We don't talk about these things enough. Anybody who says something like that, oh, you're just sentimental and you're written off. And we've got to change that. We've got to change it and allow that aspect of our humanity to play a role, because it's so important. It's so important.
Zhu Yang, anything on Shell and what you're doing here?
Well, I mean, personally, on the forest, I think I will never have the experience that you've had, Dr. Jane. My experience of the forest is gained very much by running around in my national service days and getting to grips with the forest. Yes. So, and I think for many people in Singapore, that perhaps might be their first initiation into being so close to nature, and not necessarily in Singapore either. But I think I mean, it's a commons problem, right? It just in the same way that the global warming is a shared problem, so the forests are a shared resource for all mankind. And so it's important that we are able to do more with less, and Howard has referred to the use of the waste matter. But the danger still is that as we make the use or the yield from each unit of land more rich, because we are able to not just use the fruit, we are able to use the waste and so on, that this business model will overtake and take over the whole forest. So you actually do need to put in some zoning, you do need regulation, because otherwise the superior business model will take up the whole forest. Right. And we will then grow, vanilla and everything else in the whole forest, and then you would have no more natural forest. So I think on one hand, we do need to have superior technologies and business models, but on the other hand, we do need the political will, and driven by the demand side, by people who actually buy products and elect governments, that they will support that degree of regulation that would allow the balance to be achieved.
Well, we're actually ready to get questions from the floor, but Dr. Goodall, any responses to what Howard and Zhu Yang have shared with us?
Not really, but I was thinking, following on from what you were saying, Howard, about putting price, that forests can be more valuable standing than chopped down. And there's, of course, the whole RED initiative, the reduction in emissions from deforestation and forest degradation. The RED Plus, which takes into account the people living around it. And we have to remember, I talked about chimpanzees and animals losing their habitat. but there are the people living in the forest. They're losing their homes too. It's not just the animal, it's the human animal as well as the animal. And the Red Plus, we got the first grant from the Norwegian government in Tanzania for a very huge area south of our Take Care project. So we're now in 42 villages. And down south, there's still forest left. But of course, people from where we are moving down, because now with Take Care, they're not cutting their forests, rather, instead they're growing their forests. So down in the south, we are readying the people there to receive carbon trading money when that's eventually worked out. You know, the gas guzzlers will pay by giving money to people not to cut their trees down. And to me, you know, when I first heard about this, I thought, yes, because, you know, okay, so you're an African president and you're in a forested land and you may very well be corrupt and you're offered a large sum of money for a forest concession. And this has even happened in places where the forest concession was in the, the constitution of the country as a forest forever, and yet forest concessions were sold for money. So this could be some way, I thought, that, you know, we can counteract these people who want to go in and cut the forest down. We can say, you know, here's money, maybe not quite as much, but it will go on and on, coming in, and it can pay to keep the trees standing. So we've taught all the people living in all our 42 villages, working with Google actually. They've given us Android cell phones and teaching them how to monitor their success in protecting the forest they have and restoring the forest by not cutting down tree stumps and so forth. So this area will be ready for this money when it comes in.